Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Daniel Elkins, and I'm the president of the Special Operations Association of America. And it is my honor to welcome all of you to this important discussion on the Camp Lejeune Justice Corrections Act. This legislation will fix a number of issues in the original Camp Lejeune Justice Act that will help ensure veterans are protected to get their fair day in court. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Representative Ross, as well as two people who are very familiar with this issue and have personal experience with it, Brian Emberg, as well as Kathy Macklin. And then we have Eric Flynn on the call also, who is a subject matter expert. I also wanted to thank Representative Murphy for all of his hard work on this and wish him a speedy recovery from his surgery. For decades, those stationed at Camp Lejeune were exposed to contaminated drinking water, leading to severe health problems. And unfortunately, various forms of cancer, neurological disorders, and other life-threatening conditions. The Camp Lejeune Justice Act was a huge step forward in righting these wrongs. But as we've seen it play out, there's some things we need to get squared away. And that's what Representative Ross and Hudson and Murphy aim to do with their new bill. Representative Ross is here to tell us what they're looking to fix. Representative Ross is the 2nd District in North Carolina, daughter of an Air Force veteran and longtime advocate of veterans, the original co-sponsor of the Camp Lejeune Justice Act in the 117th Congress, and fought for the passage of the PACT Act, leading the charge in the Camp Lejeune Justice Correction Act along with Congressman Murphy. Thank you, Representative Ross. Over to you to kind of talk through some of these issues in the bill that you're trying to correct.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to be with you. And in addition to being the daughter of an Air Force doctor, I have the most veterans of any member of the North Carolina congressional delegation. So while I don't have any bases in my district, once folks finish their service, they like to move to the Triangle. And so I try to do everything that I can to make the next chapter of their lives a good one. And my staff in Raleigh does everything that they can to help our veterans with all of their benefits. So I'm delighted to be with you. And I really appreciate the introduction, Daniel. I want you to know that we had hoped that everything would be fine with the original PACT Act and Camp Lejeune Justice Act. But the minute we found out about the backlog, Congressman Murphy, I really want to give him credit, as a doctor, has been a leader in this. And then I serve on the Judiciary Committee as a lawyer, understanding the problem. As you know, the Camp Lejeune Justice Act was part of the PACT Act, and it made historic progress by allowing veterans exposed to contaminated water at Camp Lejeune to pursue long overdue justice by seeking remedies in court. And just last month, we celebrated 1 million PACT Act claims being approved under the Biden administration. However, since implementing this legislation, we've learned that unforeseen financial and logistical barriers that many veterans exposed at Camp Lejeune have faced really are preventing them from getting their justice quickly. According to the American Bar Association, some predatory law firms have been charging veterans contingency fees at rates of 1/3 or 40%, taking advantage of the recent legislation and toxic exposed veterans for their own monetary gain. Moreover, in the nearly 2 years since the legislation was signed into law, only 53 of the over 175,000 claims that were submitted by veterans have been settled. And this is absolutely unacceptable. It's delaying justice for these veterans and for their families. The bipartisan legislation that I introduced alongside Congressman Greg Murphy aims to close these gaps in the original legislation, ensuring veterans and their families nationwide can easily access and quickly pursue long overdue remedies. Our legislation makes 3 critical improvements. First, It caps attorneys' fees and codifies the levels set forward by the Department of Justice, ensuring that no veteran is financially taken advantage of by lawyers acting in bad faith. Second, in contrast to previous proposals, our legislation will clarify the right to a jury trial, an issue that we've heard from attorneys about. Now, we hope that everything will get settled quickly and you won't have to go to trial, but sometimes that is necessary, and we want that avenue to be available. Third, and finally, the Camp Lejeune Justice Corrections Act will expand the jurisdiction of these cases to the entire Fourth Circuit, which covers several states and several parts of the state. This will help ease the significant backlog of cases and allow veterans to receive remedies as soon as possible. Our brave veterans put their lives on the line to defend our country and should never face barriers to accessing the justice they deserve. As the proud daughter, as you've heard, of an Air Force veteran, I'm honored to join Congressman Murphy in introducing this urgently needed legislation. We make a sacred promise to all our nation's veterans that after putting your life on the line to serve and defend our country, we will care for you when you come home. That's why it's imperative that we update the Camp Lejeune Justice Act and make needed reforms to ensure toxic exposed veterans and their survivors can pursue the justice that they are owed. Thank you again for inviting me this morning to speak with you, and to speak for you in Washington. It's an honor to serve you.
Thank you, Representative Ross. Today, we also have some guests who have had firsthand experience with these issues, who I mentioned earlier, Brian and Kathy. Today, they're here to share with us their journey that brought them here and how this bill will directly help them. I'd love to turn it over to Kathy first, followed to Brian. Thank you both for joining us for this discussion.
Thank you for setting this up and for the opportunity to speak with everyone. Congresswoman Ross, my sister is one of your constituents. I believe she lives in the Triangle area, and I'm from Charlotte, so I appreciate all of your efforts. I recently spent about a month in the Wilmington area, and I live in Northeast Atlanta, and there's just not a lot of veterans around here. And when I tell someone about our story and about the Camp Lejeune story, the overwhelming majority, the only way anybody has ever heard anything about this or knows anything about this is from the attorney commercials. There's no information. This isn't on the news. It's not covered. No one knows anything about this in the greater Atlanta area. It's refreshing to be in North Carolina and to be around people who get it. So I do appreciate the fact that people in North Carolina are still paying attention to this and still working for us, and people in the veteran community are aware and working hard for us. So my husband, Morgan, was a Marine and was stationed at Camp Lejeune from 1983 to 1985. He did his 4 years. He joined when he was 17, and he left the Marines and began a career in the security business. And he actually ended up going to work for Pinkerton Security, which was eventually bought by a company called Securitas. And he worked for them the whole rest of his life. And in early 2020, actually right when COVID was starting, all of a sudden he had really horrendous heartburn. It came from nowhere. I mean, this man had a cast iron stomach. He could eat everything. He was in great health. And within 5 days, they realized that he had stage 4 esophageal cancer. He was not a drinker. He was not a smoker. He had no history of reflux. The man never even took a Tums. So we were just devastated by that, obviously. We have 3 kids. My stepdaughter, Liz, is a social worker in Wilmington who just gave birth to our first grandchild in February. And our son, Morgan Joseph, graduated from University of North Georgia in December. He is now working for the same company that his father worked for. And my son, Sam, just graduated from Berry College and is about to go to grad school in Ohio to study linguistics, get his PhD in linguistics. So, the boys were Sam was a senior. Morgan was a freshman in college, and within 3 months, Morgan went from, 6'1", tall, healthy golfer, worked out, played golf, twice a week, walked to the course, weighed 240, was trying to lose weight. And by April, he was down to 185 pounds, sleeping all the time, about to get a feeding tube. And we were told at his first meeting at Emory with the oncologist that, it could be 3 to 6 months that we would have him. He fought like a Marine, and we were very blessed that we found a treatment that would work for him. And he tolerated the treatment very well. He worked the entire time he was under treatment, never missed a day. He would go to chemo, he would come home, because of course by then everything had shut down because of COVID. So he was able to work from home, and he never missed a day. Even, he would be taking phone calls while he was getting chemo. I think that probably helped to prolong his life, because he was a very driven person, and he was very determined that this would not beat him. And unfortunately, in fall of 2021, his cancer mutated, and the treatment that had been working no longer worked, and there just was nothing else for him. We did trials, we did all of the things, and in January of 22, he went on disability. And to that point, he'd never been in the hospital other than, outpatient to get chemo. And in January, he had a fall. And in February, he was in and out of the hospital 3 times in 4 weeks. We spent 22 of 28 days in the hospital. We would go, they would fix whatever it was. We would come home. 2 days later, we would be back. And at the end of February, it was decided that he needed to go on hospice because the cancer had just exploded throughout his entire body. And so he was home for 3 weeks, and he passed away in March of 22. So we've been 2 years without him. And when he passed away, and I'm sorry, this is an emotional time of year for me, because Morgan's birthday was June 1st. Our anniversary is June 8th. And of course, Father's Day is coming up. And we used to always call it Morgan Palooza, because he required a cake and a gift for each occasion. They all had to be separated and celebrated separately. And so, early June is actually one of the hardest times of the year for me. But he asked me as he was dying, he said, I want you to pursue this, because we couldn't figure it out. We didn't know what had caused it, and it was driving us crazy. And we talked to his oncologist, and she said, I don't understand. He has no risk factors for this. And then Morgan said, well, is at Camp Lejeune and they have this water. And she, of course, had no idea about it. And we had given her information. And she actually, she ended up writing us a letter, a nexus letter, that's, in her belief, it's probable, more likely than not, that his cancer came from the water, because he had no other risk factors for it. So we were able to get DIC, and the boys got DEA benefit. And after a long, long battle, we were able to get CHAMP VA healthcare, thank God, because we were paying $3,000 a month for Cobra. So in any event, I just, I appreciate the fact that the law was passed. Ever since he died, I think I did my first Zoom call with Bell Legal Group a week after Morgan died, to try to get information about what this was. And we got involved with working on getting it passed. And, when it passed, we were hopeful that we were going to have an opportunity to tell his story. And, I knew that we would have to prove our case. And I knew that it was not a slam dunk. And I honestly, the money is one thing, and it's very important for some people who are devastated financially by this. We were fortunate. We are not devastated financially. We are devastated, but we are not devastated financially. But people need to know what was done to our Marines. While they should have been at the safest place that they could be, at Camp Lejeune in our country, that's where Marines should be safe. And they were in more danger there than they were in Beirut in some cases, because they knew that they were under attack in Beirut. They didn't know that when they were drinking the water and taking a shower. And so I think it's important for the country to know what happened. And that was what Morgan wanted me to do, was to tell people what they did. That's why he wanted me to pursue this. So for me personally, of the recent rulings, the one where they took the jury trial away, and I actually wrote it down: nothing shall impair the right of any party to a trial by jury. Okay, that doesn't mean that we have a right to a trial by jury. I understand that. I actually don't understand it, but that's why this is so important. I don't want to tell the judges what happened to Morgan, because frankly, the judges don't care. The DOJ doesn't care. A jury of our peers will care. So we need help to get this passed in Congress. And that's where, the VSOs can help us so much, because you all get it. You are our peers. And you are more of our peers than anybody else in this country. The VSOs are our peers, and we need your help to be able to tell our story to people who should care about this. So thank you for caring, and thank you for your time and your help with this.
Thank you very much for sharing. I'd like to turn it over to Brian to share his personal experience.
I'm sorry about that. My microphone was muted there. I appreciate everybody for being part of this. With me, it started with me in December of 2013. I got a letter in the mail from the Commandant of the Marine Corps telling me I'd been exposed to contaminated water, and I'd never heard of it, didn't know nothing about it. So I went to the VA, and they told me started explaining it to me, some of the VSOs from the American Legion, and filled paperwork out, and they got me my health care. My health was pretty good then. And then 2.5 years ago, I started having issues with my breathing and everything, and come to find out I have lesions and spots all over my lungs. They couldn't figure out what was going on with that. So I was supposed to have a biopsy done at the VA in the morning. I was supposed to have it. They got me all prepped and come in and said, we're not going to do it. It's too dangerous. You could lose a lung or even die from it. So, and I asked them about getting a second opinion, and they said, we don't refer people out to get a second opinion. So my wife got online, started researching, and I was accepted at MD Anderson in Houston, Texas, and went down there, and it was the same thing. They didn't want to do the biopsies or nothing. So they referred me to one of the best lung doctors closer to me, and that was in Vanderbilt, Nashville, Tennessee. So I went there, and they're still trying to figure out what's going on with me. So now I've got my lungs, my pancreas, I've got my spleen, my colon, prostate, all have places all over them. And now I've just got stuff here. The last few days, they're getting ready to start to test me for leukemia and lupus. So, it's been a rough almost 3 years now since I started getting sick. And I've been part of fighting for all the veterans in Camp Lejeune since I found out about it in 2013. Started going to all the CDC meetings in Atlanta, Georgia, everywhere I could to find out more information. And once once I done that, and I've got got the book gave to me, A Trust Betrayed, and started reading that, and it was unbelievable that that this could be done. And same way with the documentary uh, with about Camp Lejeune, and started seeing about all the children that had died from all these illnesses, born with birth defects, leukemia. That was, to me, that was worse than poisoning the Marines or the Navy personnel, is the kids. That hurt me more than anything. So I started fighting. And when I started fighting as a Marine, they had their hands full because I didn't stop. I knocked on congressmen's doors. I knocked on senators' doors to get there. Went to Washington, D.C. For a while, they called me Mr. Persistent because I wouldn't quit. And I'm not going to quit till everybody that was affected gets some kind of justice from it. I mean, it might not be monetary, but they need something for what was done to all of us. I'm still going to fight with every inch of my body to make sure that this new bill is passed. I'm already contacting congressmen and senators to work on this bill. I've been in touch with my contacts in Washington, D.C. with the American Legion because, like Kathy said, these VSOs know more about what's going on with us. They're part of us. Some of them might have been there, and we're not going to stop fighting. And with the judges and stuff and the Department of Justice, with some of the issue from the court rulings they've had, we shouldn't, the veterans and their families members shouldn't have to concede to what they want. They should have to concede to what is best for the veterans and their families. Like with the causation, with sorry about that. The causation, and for the jury trials, we've been fighting for years for this, and they need to do more for us. Expanding the amount of courts, to 8 more would bring the backlog down. We've got over 230,000 claims that's been filed. It's going to be rough for 4 judges to even try to do 232,000 trials. So if we expand it to 8 more courts through this new bill, that will expand, go faster for us, and more veterans and their families will get justice quicker instead of having to wait for them to pass away. I've lost 5 good friends that I've met over the last few years, just this year alone already, that was at Camp Lejeune from the illnesses that never get to see their day of justice. And with, and I was talking to people the other day, the DOJ needs to concede. The judges need to concede. The attorneys already have, it's been put in this bill for a 20 and 25% cap. I mean, that's a lot of the VSOs was upset over all the lawyer fees. Well, here's the chance to cap those attorney fees to make a lot of people happy, but some people still won't be. And it's just tough trying to be out here traveling. I travel a lot. I've been to 19 states talking to veterans and family members and different VSOs and veterans organizations to let them know about Camp Lejeune. I'm in Kentucky right now, but on my way from South Carolina to Kentucky on Tuesday, I was stopped to get gas, and there was a Marine veteran that pulled up behind my truck. I got a magnet on the back of my truck that says if you was stationed at Camp Lejeune, you was exposed to highly contaminated water. And he come up and started talking to me, and he was there from 83 to 87, and nobody had ever told him. All he seen was the commercials, and he thought it was a joke. And I've talked to him. So we need to still get the word out there, and we need to get the congressmen and the senators on our side with getting this
Brian.
bill.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing. I wanted to extend a personal thanks, and all of SOA wants to extend our deepest gratitude to our speakers for sharing their expertise and stories, and everyone's dedication to this issue. We're going to be moving now into the Q&A portion. We also have Eric on the call, who is a lawyer, can help answer any technical questions that any of the attendees may have. Just as a friendly reminder, if you do have a question, please submit them by pressing the Q&A button, and we will get through as many as we can. We'll give everyone a few moments to put in their questions, and I'll get the ball rolling with a question to Eric. Why are jury trials so important?
Yeah, it's a great question, Daniel. And, let me first start by saying that, while the stories that Kathy and Brian share are extremely powerful and very impactful for us, they represent so many voices that we've heard for our clients. And it's an honor for us, for me, for my firm personally, to represent them and to be here today speaking with you all. It's obviously an issue we feel very strongly about. So why are jury trials so important? There's empirical data that shows that jury trials yield higher valuations and are more effective at determining valuations for things like what we see here that are not frequently litigated, right? So, in a typical case, judges, like, let's take asbestos, for example. Asbestos cases are very well litigated. There's a lot of data out there as to what an asbestos claim is worth. And judges deciding asbestos cases have a very large amount of data to pull from. The type of harm that was suffered by Camp Lejeune veterans and their families is really unique. You're talking about, Parkinson's, esophageal cancer, bladder cancer, kidney cancer, liver cancer. These are not, myelodysplastic syndrome, aplastic anemia. These are really rare diseases and do not come up in litigation very often. So there's just, frankly, not a lot of data for judges to look at. So when you're talking about the value of human suffering or the value of human life, like in Kathy's example for Morgan, a jury is really the best way to decide that value. And I think so from an empirical perspective, that's really what we think is very important. But I think there's more to it than just the empirical data. I'll pass it over to Kathy real quick. Why do you think telling your story in front of a jury is so important?
Again, it's they're my peers. The judges are not our peers. And just, I get the judges are doing their job and the DOJ is doing their job. And I fully expected that to happen. But I went and sat in on a status conference meeting with the DOJ and the plaintiffs group and the magistrate judge. And again, it's a sensitive time of year for me, but they pushed it down the road. The next meeting, they were trying to do their scheduling, and the head DOJ lawyer stood up and said, well, I can't make that meeting because my son's graduating and I'm going to his graduation. And it was all I could do to stand up and say, who didn't have their dad at their graduations? My two boys. My two boys didn't have their dad at their graduations. My boys are 22 and 23 years old. Their dad would be 61 years old. They should have had their dad at their graduations. And then the magistrate judge was like, oh, well, I'm going to be on vacation and I'm going to do this. And so now it's a month down the road that they're going to have the next meeting. They don't get it. They don't care about us because we're just plaintiffs to them. We are not people. So I want a jury of my peers to hear what they did to us, because the judges don't get it. They're not going to get it. That's not their job to get it. The jury, that's their job. And I promised Morgan I would tell people what happened. And he didn't mean for me to tell a judge. He meant for me to tell a jury of my peers what they did to us. So for me, I don't care if it's more money. I could be less money, because people could say, well, you know what? We all get exposed to stuff and you don't know what a jury's going to do. I'm fine with that. I just want somebody to know.
And I think that that's a very important, and that's an idea. That's something that we hear all the time. It's important for juries to hear, to be judged by a jury of your peers. But also when I talk about values, I want to be clear. This legislation is not just about the people in trial. This legislation is really about the 99% of people who won't go to trial and who will be dependent on a negotiated resolution, right? So you need to set fair value at the beginning so that that can then inform the valuation of all other resolutions, right? So it's, when we're talking about this bill, and there are a lot of things in here that look trial oriented, but they're really not just trials. The biggest impact are for the 99% of all people, right, who are just not going to go to trial. And the data shows that, right? So there's 250,000 some odd claims at the Navy, but there's only 1,700 claims filed in court. Don't expect that ratio to change very much. So we're really thinking about the global population of Camp Lejeune, and that's why jury trials are so vital. It's important that people have buy-in.
Thank you, Eric. Another question for you is, who gets to decide whether the case should be a jury trial or a judge? Is the plaintiff, the defendant, the judge? Could you elaborate on that?
Great question. Yeah, this is the plaintiff, right? So this whole bill returns the power back to the veteran, right? That's the best part about this. This is an incredibly pro-veteran bill. So you, as a veteran, get to determine who is going to try your case. That's an incredibly powerful thing to have, right? So you can say, I want a jury trial. You can say, I don't want a jury trial. I want to go to a bench trial. And there are reasons potentially for both of those, but the veteran gets to decide. The government does not. The court does not.
Thank you very much.
Hey, let me jump in here with a question from the audience. So a question that is being asked here is, when will the trials start, and what happens if the legislation doesn't pass before then?
Yeah, good question too. So the trials are slated to start for our track 1 illnesses. So let me just back up. The court has proceeded with a track process. So track 1 are Parkinson's, bladder cancer, kidney cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and leukemia. Those will start in the fall of this year, and will continue through the fall and the winter. What happens if we don't have this bill passed? There's going to be a bunch of things that happen, right? So, you've got the question of whether we're going to do this in front of a jury or a bench. That's your number one question, right? Then there's the question of, what is the level of causation that you need to prove? We talked about this. So there's a general causation and a specific causation concept here, and I'll break it down pretty quickly. So let's just take Kathy's example real quick. So Morgan had esophageal cancer. The first question that the court wants us to answer is, can esophageal cancer be caused by the water at Camp Lejeune? That's called general causation. The next question is called specific causation. Was Morgan's esophageal cancer caused by the water at Camp Lejeune? Recent court order that came out earlier this week says that we have to prove specific causation, and then starts to erect exposure concepts. You can already see them starting to create barriers and limits, right? That's not what this was about. This was about getting the most people justice, right? It's not about a specific number of people that fall within a narrow scientific window. So that's really important, though, for trial. You have to know what level of causation you need to prove to trial. The third most important thing is, where are we going to go to trial? The Eastern District of North Carolina is very busy. And our ability to go to trial faster, to return verdicts so that we can inform resolution for everybody, is directly impacted by where we can go. Can we take these trials, which, by the way, where they get tried is also a veteran determination. can we take these trials and go to another district that's less busy where we can get into their dockets faster? So it's incredibly important that this issue be decided this summer before we go to trial. It is fundamentally important because the outcomes of these trials and the levels of causation and where these trials happen will immediately influence the first batch of resolution for track one, which will immediately influence all the other batches of resolution. So we have a very short period of time to act on this, and it's really, really critical that we do.
Great. Thanks to you, Eric. And kind of similarly along those lines, someone was asking, are these cases not being settled because the government is dragging their feet, or is it the claimants are refusing the settlement offers at this point? Where are we at? What's the holdup on there only being, what you said, 50 cases? What was it the Representative Ross said? 50 cases? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You know, the government doesn't make many offers, and they're these EO offers, right? And the EO offers are elective option offers, or EO offers are based on this concept that it's really all about how long you spend on base, right? And it's not, it doesn't take into consideration people's suffering. It doesn't look at anything. So I think it's not, yeah, I guess I bristle at the idea that veterans are refusing. It's why are they kind of not taking these offers? The statistics show that they're not. I think it has less to do with the amount of money. It has more to do with the concepts that the government is using on this, right? So we're not valuing they're not valuing suffering. They make you choose one disease. So if you have kidney cancer, which metastasized into bladder cancer, or your non-Hodgkin's lymphoma treatment caused you to have kidney disease, you don't get compensated for both of those. You only get compensated for the highest one, right? There are a lot of things here that are really kind of a slap in the face, not to mention the 35-year latency period that the government has arbitrarily imposed eliminates 80% of all eligible claimants. So let's just say that there's only 9 diseases that are even eligible. Within those 9, 80% of eligible claimants are eliminated already because of the 35-year latency. So it's really both. The government has created a system that was designed to fail from the beginning. Their compensation structure doesn't take into account the realities of all of these people. And secondly, I mean, the veterans know that this is BS. I mean, that's what they're reacting to. And it's not just lawyers saying, hold out for another fee. If that was true, you wouldn't have, you know, the universal rejection of these offers that you have.
If I can
Eric,
just speak as a client, just
Go
give a
ahead.
client's perspective on it. Esophageal cancer is not one of the conditions that would be covered, but if it were, and if we met the latency period, which I think maybe we did by 3 months, and it's a random number, but whatever, that's what they decided they wanted to offer. But all other things being equal, if we qualified for it, I think at most what we would be compensated would be, I think it would have been like $450,000, because they at 350, and then we would get the bonus $100,000 because Morgan died. So we would get, you know, maybe $450,000. We would pay attorney's fees out of that. And there's still a question of whether that would be taxable to us. So, and they have not told us that. They just tell you to consult a tax professional to find out. Well, since this is a brand new thing, guess what's going to happen? We're going to pay taxes on that. So then you're talking about what? Maybe we would walk away with $200,000. And again, it's not about the money, but my husband was a pretty successful business person, and he was entering the highest earning years of his life. And that would not compensate us for 2 years of his earnings, just to be really crass about it. That doesn't even talk about how it is for my boys not to have their dad. My stepdaughter didn't have her father there to see the birth of his grandchild. I mean, you tell me, is $200,000 worth it? It's not for me. I would have turned it down if they offered it to me. But again, we don't qualify.
Eric, another question. Does this act impact previous legal settlements or claims or cases related to Camp Lejeune contamination?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't impact the previous settlements at all. Just so we're clear, the DOJ, as part of their settlements, enforces a 25% fee cap. So there's no, so we've all lawyers that accept settlements under the elective option program have to agree to a 25%. So this is completely in line with what we're doing already. So it doesn't have any retroactive effect. But here's an important part, and I keep coming back to this. This act will change people's calculus as to whether or not to take a settlement. If you're worried about specific causation, if you're worried about where you were on base, or proving up your grandfather's or your loved one's exposure while they were on base, because it's hard to do, this act eliminates that worry. So you will make you might make a different decision. And that's really important, because this is about empowering veterans to make the right decisions for themselves, not because they're afraid that there is some roadblock that the government is going to erect, or some scientific barrier that the court's going to erect, right? So veterans should have the right to make their own decisions about whether to take settlements or not, and not out of fear, but out of informed decision-making that's right for each of them. So, this will affect people's decision-making process. The existing ones are fine. They've been made, but this will affect people's decision-making process.
That's great. Thank you, Eric. I have another question from the audience. We have a few VSOs here, and they're asking, what can VSOs do to help? Daniel, I think this is probably a good question for you here. What ways can VSOs help with this act?
Thank you very much, Steve, and the attendees who have asked that particular question. So we are currently working a coalition letter amongst the VSOs that have this as one of their resolutions, our priority. So we would love for VSOs to sign on. Additionally, we can coordinate and communicate our legislative strategies, and also work together potentially to do joint meetings if there's an interest in educating other members and their staff, as well as those on the committees of jurisdiction, on the importance of this. And then lastly, if there's an interest to collaborate with other veterans groups, we'd love to do or have a Hill Day specific to this issue if there's general interest. So those are a lot of different ways. You can always reach out directly to us on that, and we'd be happy to follow up.
Awesome. All right, got another one. This is a kind of a longer one here. I 100% support attorney fee caps of 20 and 25 to mirror the FTCA. Man, we're getting technical here. It should have been the case of the original CLGA. I do applaud this provision in the new bill, but have concerns that certain members of Congress, like Senator Sullivan and Tillis, will attempt to amend this to an unreasonable cap. The question, I guess, I really wish Representative Ross was still with us, but do Representative Ross, Murphy, and other proponents of the bill, such as VSO, have they thought through safeguards against the Correction Act actually becoming a detriment to Lejeune victims? Ostensibly, I suppose, being worried that there will be amendments to the fee caps being much lower. So I guess, Eric, Daniel, have you guys engaged on this? What are the representatives thinking?
Yeah, we've engaged with them on this. I think the bill is so overwhelmingly impactful and in favor of veterans that there has to be some pretty strong feelings to amend it. But Senator Sullivan is on record multiple times as talking to the DOJ and touting his discussions with Attorney General Garland, and locking in the 25% fee cap. He should be in favor of this, right? I mean, the 2 and 10 frankly seemed to me to be more political grandstanding than anything else, because he was in favor of the 2025 that came out of the DOJ as part of their settlements. He also was supportive of Representative Issa and Representative Bost's 2025 provisions in the House. So I think Senator Sullivan should hopefully agree with this. Same with Senator Tillis. We've engaged to the extent we can with Senator Tillis and with other members on this issue. I think we have some buy-in that this is the right thing to do. To disincentivize attorneys to go to 2 and 10 might disincentivize attorneys. It wouldn't necessarily disincentivize our firm, because we just, you don't fight for these people for 16, 17 years of your life and then just go away. But I think that that's hopefully something that has been taken into consideration by all members of Congress, that if you look at the history of attorneys' fee bills on Camp Lejeune Justice Act, this is squarely within what both sides have talked about.
Thank you, Eric. This is a question for Brian and Kathy. What challenges have claimants faced in seeking justice and compensation so far?
Well, to me, the hardest part, is we file our claim, and then the court system stopped taking claims filed into federal court because they said they was getting overwhelmed. And then with all the judgments, with most of the stuff that the Department of Justice has made, and the judges agreeing with them on 90% of it, stopping the jury trials, these crazy EO offers, their the causation, and this bill will give us the ability for us to decide on what we want instead of the government deciding and telling us what we have to do. The veterans shouldn't have to concede to anything other than what we want. And with what they're doing to us is taking it away from us. It's taking the right for Kathy to speak about her husband. It's taking other family members that lost children. It's taking their way for them to speak about how it has affected them by losing a child, losing a spouse, losing a mother, losing a father. And without this bill, they're putting a muzzle on us and keeping us quiet.
And I'll just address from the veteran side, we didn't qualify for a lot of veterans benefits because of the time that Morgan served and the length of his service. We used a VA loan. That was pretty much the extent of our involvement with the VA until this all happened. And at one point, we had private health insurance, but at one point we did pursue VA health benefits because we were concerned that Morgan might lose his job. And so we did apply because esophageal cancer is presumptive through the VA for health care. We were denied right away. They ignored the fact that it's on the presumptive list, and they told us we didn't qualify. So we had to appeal it and fight it. And we got that. And we had one appointment with a VA doctor, a telemed, and he had no idea what we were talking about with Camp Lejeune. Fortunately, we never had to pursue anything. We were able to stay with our private insurance. But then when Morgan passed away, and I went to a Georgia VSO who was fantastic. And I took all of my evidence, and I actually got a lot of information from other widows about esophageal cancer because it's not presumptive for disability. But we were able to prove our case because of the information and because of the strong nexus letter that we had. And so we relatively quickly were awarded the DIC and the DEA. For the CHAMP VA, it took me 18 months to get our CHAMP VA approved. They kept denying us because they said that we weren't Morgan's dependents. Marriage license, birth certificates, death certificate. I mean, at one point I said, do you want our DNA? I don't know what more I can provide to you, but constantly fighting. And, I'm not telling anybody who's a veteran who has had to fight for benefits anything, but I would have to pick the day that I was willing to call and fight. Did I have enough strength today to deal with the nonsense that I was going to have to deal with? And eventually our Senator Ossoff's office got involved, and I still don't know what happened. Not going to question it, but all of a sudden we had healthcare benefits or health insurance benefits. So it's hard enough when you have to fight the VA. We weren't supposed to have to fight for this. This law was supposed to be that we could file an administrative claim with the Navy, prove our case, and it would be done. We weren't supposed to have to keep fighting. So that's my 2 cents on that.
I want to speak on something about what Kathy spoke about there. on getting the health care and get disqualified. In the 2012 law, Janie Hunsinger Act, it is in there that any veteran that was stationed at Camp Lejeune automatically qualifies for health care, and they would go into priority group 6. But a lot of VAs are making the veterans take means test, in which they do not have to if they was at Camp Lejeune. But that's how a lot of the veterans from Camp Lejeune are getting denied medical care, because they're having to take means test, and the 2012 law says they do not. So they're missing out there, and that's probably what happened with you, Kathy, because no matter what your income was, you automatically qualify if you was at Camp Lejeune.
Right. They didn't know that.
Yeah, and that is really, really unfortunate. It's never the intent for service members and their families to keep fighting after we've stopped fighting. When we transition, we have paid our service to the United States, and you all are continuing to have to fight, and that is very, very, very heartbreaking. Steve, back to you.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I think I totally agree. We're kind of winding down here. We only have a few minutes, so I want to try and get through as many questions as we can. So if we can try and maybe run through these a little bit quick, that'd be awesome. So Eric, we got a question here from Dr. Ryan Ziegler. He's one of our board members. He's just got his doctorate. Congrats to him. Eric, do you think paralleling asbestos cases to water contamination is a good comparison? And what differences do you see in how these two similar situations will play out in the judicial system?
Yeah, so I think they're not really comparable in terms of many things. In fact, they're actually a really good foil for each other, because asbestos serves to show you what a well-worn, well-tried, long-standing issue looks like and how that gets resolved. And Lejeune shows you what a brand new law and really, really unique and challenging, complex health effects are like, right? I mean, that's why this bill is so important. Everything in this bill fixes unforeseen changes made to the way that the original Camp Lejeune Justice Act was enacted by the judges. So this bill is fixing things that nobody could have foreseen, right? Nobody thought that the judges would eliminate a jury trial or knock out specific causation or take so long for trials. And that's not something that people thought about, right? So this fixes all of that. And I think this shows you just how uncertain all of this was at the beginning when you have a brand new law and a brand new case in a situation that's incredibly complex. Contrast that to asbestos. I mean, some people thought that this was like an asbestos claim where you just kind of put in your information and out comes money. And I think what all of this has shown all of us, right, the court, the way the DOJ litigates this stuff, is that that's not it at all. It should be easy, but it's really not. I mean, the DOJ is taking 8-hour depositions of Parkinson's disease people. These are people who speak through a computer, and they have to sit for an 8-hour deposition. They get asked incredibly invasive questions about their sexual lives. This isn't at all what I think anybody intended, and we need to correct that. We need to bring that back, and that's what this law does.
Great. I got two more kind of back to back here. I think, Eric, you can handle this. What impact will correction and type of harm have on this case and the veterans and their families? And then what impact will the change to accrual date have on this case?
Same answer. More people will be able to get compensation under this bill. The accrual date, we thought, I think when we first looked at the bill, that accrual date was pretty much straightforward. It accrues when you are on Lejeune and you get exposed to all this toxic water. Come to find out, the DOJ thinks that means diagnosis date. So if you weren't diagnosed before 2022, August 10th, 2022, you're out, according to DOJ. You got to fight to prove that your illness was underlying and relates back to before 2022. That's not what was intended. I mean, come on. That's not what accrual meant. Everybody knows that, but that's not what the DOJ says. And then this idea of type, nobody wanted it to be that like Kathy's got to prove, Morgan's entire genetic history to show that it was specific causation. No, that's not what was intended either. Morgan had esophageal cancer. What's important is that esophageal cancer is caused by the water at Camp Lejeune, right? And he was at Camp Lejeune for the 30 days. That should be enough. That's, I think, what Congress intended. And this bill will fix that. It fixes all of these things that have come up that no one could foresee in the original bill and is caused by either the DOJ or the courts.
Within that, kind of a follow-on question is, has the Department of Justice responded to the introduction of the Camp Lejeune Justice Corrections Act?
We don't know. I don't know if they're working behind the scenes in Congress to look at it. I suspect they will. They seem to always have a position on political matters like this. So I suspect that somebody will reach out to them and get their temperature on it. But again, for the VSO members here, this is just morally the right thing to support. This is bringing the power back to the veterans. It's supporting veterans. Everything about this is about the veterans. So I'm sure maybe the DOJ doesn't like that it makes it harder for them to defend, but frankly, I don't really care. This is better for the veterans. And I think that your support means everything to the Congress members that we've spoken to. VSO support is one of the first questions we get asked. Where are veterans on this? Where are VSOs on this? I need to hear from veterans and VSOs. So it's just really, really important for y'all to reach out and kind of get this growing.
And we're starting to close down, so I think this may be our last question. Are there any upcoming rulings or other updates we should be watching out for?
Yeah, so we're about to head into trial. So, we're not going to have too many rulings between now and then. There are some appellate court issues that are happening on the jury trial to try to get the jury trial back. But, it's just a long process to go through the appeals court process. And it's not, like we talked about earlier, we really need this now. Next, you're going to see are going to be trials, which is both exciting because we want to get to trial, but also terrifying because we need to get this bill done before we get to trial.
All right. There are no new questions that I am currently tracking. So I wanted to personally thank our panelists today and for taking the time to do the Q&A. And I personally wanted to thank everyone for joining the discussion, asking some good questions. My contact details are daniel@soaa.org. Happy to field any questions or route you to the right people. It's been dropped in the chat for everyone. Thank you again, and we look forward to working with all of you as we work on this particular new legislation. Thank you. Bye now.
Thank you all.
Bye. Thank you.